Hi, and welcome, and thank you for the thousands and thousands of you who are right here. I taught at Cornell for 10 years, and I'd always take the people in the back row and make them answer all the questions, but I won't do that today, so you're good. All right. How many of you know where you want to be buried when you die? There's one? There's one? I mean, like the state, generally. You know? So my wife Liz, who's with me today, she and I were living back east, and we read an article in a magazine that said, basically the premise of the magazine was that this article in this magazine was this woman said that she had been contacted by numerous cemeteries trying to pre-sell her lots, or plots, I guess they're called. And it just occurred to her, I can't do this. I have a Utah body, and I'm going to be buried in Utah. And I would submit that that's one of the things that is really clear when you get asked that question. So Liz and I both said, oh yeah, well, we're Utah bodies. It doesn't matter where we live, and we've lived all over the country. Another question like that is at the bottom of my 1040 IRS form every year. How many of you have had the privilege of knowing what a 1040 is? Come on, everybody in here has earned a nickel in their life. At the bottom it says, what's your occupation? And since I've had 5 careers, or 6, and I don't even know how many jobs, 40 or 50 titles, what should I put? Guess what I put? Analyst. And I'm going to talk about why that is. And this class today is for all of you who are geeks and dweebs and dorks. And even if you're not, I'm not always one, but I am one inside. So we're going to talk about some analytical things. And let's just start with a few seconds about me. I'm a really weird guy. I'm a zebra. That means I'm not a horse. I'm sort of in between. And I lived in Salt Lake as well as Chicago and Dallas and DC and Birmingham and Scotland and London and finance and accounting, but I was the head of sales for Marriott. Kind of weird. Spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets. I am an Excel wizard. My son would tell you I stink at it because I'm old, but I still love spreadsheets. But guess what? I'm also a grammarian. My grandkids will tell you I just love talking about getting their grammar correct. I'm a capitalist, but I also am an academic. I have a degree in strategy, but I really think execution is far more important than strategy, personally, even though I got a degree, my MBA. I've worked at consumer products, but I've also been in consulting and hotels and software. I was a big company exec. I've been a little company exec. I've been a bootstrapping entrepreneur. I've counted the pencils and the paper clips. I've been a chairman and CEO 4 or 5 times, but I'm really an analyst at heart. And now I've spoken at BYU and Utah and now UVU and about 50 other universities.
Save the best for last.
Of course. And I have the mask now as well. So I guess I'm a Wolverine. None of this matters except for the thing in green down at the bottom, which is analytics. And I'm going to talk to you today about analytics and why it's important. And I thought about how to do this. And I thought the most interesting way for you would be if I actually gave examples from my life. Now, some of these are going to be old guy examples, but they all apply to your life. When I talk about in a minute Jay Leno, think about Jimmy Fallon or Conan or whoever your guy, it doesn't matter. All right, so first thing, I want a little bit of participation. Why does data matter? One of you thousands of people here in this audience.
And I'm looking at my phone in case I get some from online.
Okay. Why does data matter? There's no right answer. Why do you think it matters?
See if it works.
See if something works, okay? What else?
To show relationships.
Show relationships. It's the most important reason for collecting data.
Return on investment?
Return on investment from a financial perspective. Guess what my most important data usage was? The pro and con sheet I did on Elizabeth Winters. Right? 38 years ago.
There's a pro and con.
Come on, you all have done this mentally or physically. You've said, what are the pros and cons of marrying this beautiful woman? By far the best decision I ever made, but also very important analysis, which occurred with a little bit of smooching and other curricular activities. Okay. Not moving. Now we're in trouble. Can you hit it? Okay, so I'd like to talk about these things. Why data is important. I'm going to give you some examples and then any questions that you have. So you just gave me a whole bunch of ideas. Let me give you some back. The right data leads to better decision making. The right data helps you sift the wheat from the chaff. You can spot trends before they're readily apparent. You can highlight results. The data, this is often quoted, data is the new oil. Back in the 1800s, early 1900s, oil was the big resource. Now data is the resource. Data is absolutely as important. Look at Google and Facebook, and everybody uses data. You can be a geek and still make a lot of money. That's an important message. When I came out of school at BYU, I didn't know what I wanted to be, so I became an accountant because I love numbers. And data was not all that important back then. I mean, it was important, but nobody did it for a living. And I have migrated in and out, like I said, of data all these years. You can be a geek and make gobs of money. All right, this is my favorite cartoon on this subject. Of course, going on and on about analysis can't compare to actual analysis. And he's trying to win her. Look at her face. That's probably what my wife looked like. All right, you ready for show and tell? Here we go. These are examples of how I've used data in my career. And this is just a few. There are hundreds more, but I thought these would be interesting. Anybody ever heard of Adrian Dantley in this room? How about on TV? Anybody? Okay. Adrian Dantley was one of the LeBron Jameses of my youth. He was a phenomenal basketball player. He played on the Utah Jazz. This is a picture of him on both the left and the right. I went and looked him up because it was interesting. He's now a crossing guard, but not because he lost all of his money like quite a lot of athletes do. He just loves children, so he wants to be a crossing guard. So I worked at Price Waterhouse in Salt Lake from 83 to 86. Adrian Dantley was a star player, and he got a contingent bonus. One of the earliest, not the first, but one of the earliest contingent bonuses given to an NBA player. And it became our responsibility to figure out how to amortize the cost of his contingent bonus. How do you do that? If this was a classroom rather than a lecture, I would actually have you give me some examples. How do you do that? How do you say, well, I don't remember the amount, but let's say they were going to give him $1 million if he lasted through the season. And the reason for that is because he missed 60 games by tearing some ligaments in his wrist. So they came back to us. It was a team of us. I was a junior grunt boy on the team. But I'll never forget us all sitting around and saying, how many years should we amortize Adrian Dantley's contingent bonus? And what should we do it on? Should we do it on his ankles or his knees? His longevity in the NBA? Think about this for 1 second. How would you do this? Well, we decided that we'd use actuarial tables on his career. We would do the probability of wear out and the probability of injury. And we amortized his bonus. Here's another example. I worked for Frito-Lay for years, 3 years. This is an example that made them gobs and gobs of money. So this is, do you know who this is? This is Jay Leno. Jay Leno would be the Conan or Jimmy Fallon or whoever that you watch today. Now, before you go crazy, this is a piece of analysis that I did in, it doesn't have a year, but probably around 1986. This analysis says that everything in business has learning curves, or sometimes called experience curves. For a human being, it's the more I do something, the faster I get at it, and the cost per unit comes down the longer I do it. Does that make sense? There are other kinds of experience curves, like a fryer that you fry potato chips in. If you have a short fryer, the cost per pound is a certain amount. The longer a fryer gets, the less cost per pound. So that's what these all show. These three at the bottom are actually logarithmic scales that are showing the relationship between two things. All three of them on the left show the cost per pound. And at the bottom, you have line scale. That's how long a fryer. In the middle, you have capacity utilization. That is, out of 24 hours a day, how many hours a day is it being used? And you have wage rates. Once you get the relationship between these three things, if you then know those exact examples at the bottom of each of these graphs, you can plug those into a spreadsheet and you will know exactly what the cost per pound is in fryer labor of a potato chip. I did this in 1986. It was with these consultants called Mars and Company. They were very expensive. And it was one of the most fascinating projects I ever did. So we went to all 40 Frito-Lay plants. We looked at every one of these things. And they wanted us to tell them what will be the J's amount. J's was a competitor of Frito-Lay. What would be the J's? So how would you do this? If these relationships between these variables exist, how would you do this? Well, you would go and get each one of those variables at the bottom. It's now been 30 plus years, so I don't think I'll get sued. I hope. So how do you get those? How do I get the wage rate at a competitor's plant? Legally. Well, you go over to the bar across the street from their plant, you sit down and order a Coke. The plant guys get off, they come in, they don't order Cokes. Half an hour later, they're telling you anything you want to hear. Hey, how much you guys making over there? $9.25 an hour. You write it down, you get, there's 3 here, we had 390 of these. Put them all into a spreadsheet, and I can tell you exactly how much a Frito-Lay bag of potato chips costs and how much a J's costs. What do you do with that information? Well, you create what we used to call Mondrian charts. Anybody know who Mondrian is? Are there any art majors in here? Okay, Mondrian used to do square things. I've had to cover a couple of these up. Does this have a pointer? Nope. Okay. So on the left side are different kinds of places that Frito-Lay products are sold, and across the top are different kinds of Frito-Lay products. What do you think cheese puffs are? Come on. Cheetos, good. What potato chips does Frito-Lay have? There's the exact same today, by the way. Lay's and Ruffles. How about, what are corn products of Frito-Lay? Fritos. The big one is Doritos. Okay. So I'm going to turn you all into analysts. This shows how much money, I'll just make it simple, how much money Frito-Lay makes on each of their products in each of their locations. Where does Frito-Lay make all their money in 1987? The big bulk of their money. It's the biggest square. Who can tell me? How about you? Can you tell me? I'll point. Look, what's the biggest square? Tortilla chips in supermarkets. Well, that makes sense. That means Frito-Lay makes all their money on Doritos at big supermarkets. You got it? Guess where Frito-Lay up to this point in time put all their advertising? Potato chips in supermarkets. Does that make them any money? So because of this analysis that used the graph I showed you before, because of this analysis, and it was a team, it wasn't just me, this happened.
Well, howdy, let me guess. You've been waiting for Cool Ranch flavored Doritos, and I can't say I blame you. Creamy, Cool Ranch seasoning. And those ingredients, what are we talking there? Maybe a tomato, an onion or two? See, this is what you storytellers might call a cornucopia of nature's treasures, and that's why no other chip tastes like Cool Ranch, and no other crunch. It jumpstart your horse!
Cool Ranch flavored Doritos brand tortilla chips. One heck of a crunch.
Okay, so I brought you a 34-year-old ad. This ad made Jay Leno rich. And this ad made Frito-Lay sales explode. Because up until then, it had been Lay's and Ruffles, Lay's and Ruffles. I mean, after all, it's called Frito and Lay, right? It wasn't called Doritos. So Doritos made gobs and gobs. This one piece of analytical work made Frito-Lay an enormous amount of money. And by the way, also Jay Leno, and who later became the Tonight Show and so forth. Here's an example that saved them a lot of money. So have you ever seen this ad?
I'm McCracken. She's wrong.
Hi.
We got McCracken's apple chips.
Our job is not easy.
Get McCracken! The bad apple gang. And the rest of the apple chips. They're apples. They're chips. Hand them over or run with applesauce. And they're fun. Yes, they go.
Oh, man, you saved me.
I'm handsome now. McCracken's apple chips. Apples that don't crunch are fun to lunch.
You've never seen this ad because it never ran. And the reason it never ran is because I'm going to have a piece of analysis I'm going to show you. This is a memo from my boss to the chief financial officer and chief strategy officer of Frito-Lay. Up until this time, Frito-Lay had spent something like 10 or 15 years and $30 million building a plant to make apple chips the same way that potato chips are made. This was the memo, I just redid it for you, from my boss. Rich has completed the economic analysis of the options, which we will be reviewing today. The viable economic alternatives are slim and unlikely. I won't get into why that is, I'll just tell you the top line. Basically, people will eat Doritos like you can't believe. People will eat, there are people in this country that eat a bag of 30 plus 32 ounce Doritos every single day. The number of heavy users of Doritos is off the charts. Guess what? Nobody wants to eat apple chips more than once. It doesn't leave you unsatiated. You don't want more. It's because there's no salt, right? It's sugar. So I got the opportunity. They all chickened out and they pushed me to the executive committee. Here I am, this 28-year-old kid, and they pushed me into the big mahogany room to present, I'll go back one, the favorite new product of Frito-Lay's EVP. He used to wear white lab coats to the meetings. This was his baby, and I have to go present to him. And this is the last page of the slide. Frito-Lay sold the plant. They sold the product. You can still get it. It's usually in the fruit and vegetable section of a grocery store. But they took a massive loss. And the reason they did is because of this analysis that we did. I thought I was going to get fired. So there's something to be said in do what you have to do and do it right. Here's a Frito-Lay example that was an unusual situation. Normally in business, the inputs equal the outputs. You can always figure out when a manufacturing process where the inputs equal the outputs. We had this situation where the inputs into potato chips are potatoes, and you put some oil and salt and seasoning, and out comes potato chips and some evaporation. Make sense? Frito-Lay had a problem. This is the problem. They didn't equal. So here I am, newly minted MBA, and they say, Rich, go figure this out. And I go, well, thank you very much. What do I do? And they said, well, you just go to the plants and you look. So I flew to all these plants all over the United States. And this is, without going into the details of how potato chips are packaged, potato chips come off of a line and they land in a thing where there are 10 circular weighers, and they add up the 3 weighers that get closest to the bag. If it says a 3-ounce bag or an 8-ounce bag, they add up all of these little bins that comes closest to the bag weight, and they dump, and they're going fast, okay? So this is actually a picture of that. After hours of analysis, and I went to all these plants, and I discovered this: chips in flight. And it ends up, see those 3 potato chips? They are not in the weigher, right? And they are not in the bag. They are chips in flight. This was like, I can't remember the number. I wish I could remember the number. I'm too old now, but like $50 million. When you have 40 plants making chips all day long, billions of bags of potato chips. This was a piece of analysis. I'm showing you the end because I could not figure it out. Because you add up all the stuff going in, it should equal all the stuff coming out. And I thought, somebody's wrong here, until I went and looked at these machines and I went, oh, chips in flight. Here's another example from Frito-Lay that was dang fun. In 1985, this man and his wife, her name's Ann, were messing around with resealable packaging. Now, you guys have this all day, every day, but in 1985, we hadn't invented resealable packaging yet. And in order to test all these different resealable things, these methods, they needed something to put into the packaging. Make sense? She made this really awesome white popcorn. So they would load it into all the bags and they would test and see how long can it remain fresh. Everybody with me? Well, guess what happened? They called it smart food popcorn. How many of you have eaten smart food popcorn? Everybody now. In 1985, it was just at universities and colleges in the Northeast. Massachusetts is, I think, where they were. So my boss, there's a team of us, 6 of us, we got to go analyze this business, decide how much it was worth, and then put it into the Frito-Lay distribution system. What do you think that would do to a little company like Smart Food Popcorn? You think it'd go up? Okay, so this is the chart I drew. And I can't get into all the details because of time, but basically I said, okay, we take this New England franchise and we buy this company and we put it in the base case, and I don't remember, but I'm guessing that means that they were making $3.7 million a year by then. And if we buy the company and we dump it inside of the Frito-Lay distribution system, these are potential options that could happen. Is this a good buy? The answer to that question should be, how much did we have to pay? Right? Because it could be a good buy, it could not be a good buy. Frankly, with Frito-Lay, everything's a good buy. They did $420 million in sales. This is the last number I could find that was presented. We bought Smart Food Popcorn for, I won't say how much, very little. And then we bought the guy a red Corvette. There's a whole story there I can't tell, but it was really awesome. We bought it, dumped it into the Frito-Lay system, and now, you know, what is it, 30 years later, 25 years later, it's off the chart. Okay. I went to work for Marriott, and this is an example that changed the way that Marriott and the whole hotel industry prices, by the way. But this example was so interesting, I just thought I'd share it with you. You may not know, but this is what occupancies look like at a typical business hotel. What do you notice from this? Go ahead. Wednesday night. It's what I call the Tetris clog. Anybody know how to play Tetris? What happens if you just let them fall? They all clog up on Wednesday, right? So you get the Tetris clog. So what if somebody, this is for, let's say, a week from today, and this is where we're sitting in our bookings on the internet. What do we do if this happens? Someone calls in and says, I want to stay Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. What are your options? Are there any options here? Do you go back to that person on Wednesday? Can you take this reservation? You can't, because you've already sold out Wednesday. Do you go back to one of these people on Wednesday and say, never mind, we were full, sorry. What does that do for customer service? Down the tank. So what do you do? Well, what you do is you put in restrictions in advance. So first of all, you forecast that that person's going to come. And then before you get to this point, you say, anybody who's coming in on a Tuesday and stays 3 nights, we're open. Anybody who calls and wants to stay just Wednesday night, what are we? Full. Are we really full? No, so we don't lie. We just say, I'm sorry, I can't take your reservation. This simple thing added $500 million to Marriott over the 3 years that we did it before I left. In not profit, but in revenues, most of it, a lot of it profit. And the reason you know that is because you know exactly who called and you can go back and change it. You can go back and see, what if we'd taken these guys instead of these guys? Well, you can't discriminate based upon looking at someone, but you can discriminate based upon how long they're going to stay. And so what happens is you raise the shoulders, which are Thursday and Monday, and Friday, you raise those up and you keep Wednesday at a sellout. Does that make sense? This single analytical change was worth billions and billions of dollars to the hotel industry. One of the biggest risks of my career, I thought I'd show you, is that this is an ad that ran in USA Today. It says, some business travelers take the trouble to call us in advance. That's worth something in my book, Bill Marriott. But down in the bottom it says, you can come and stay with us, but if you want a cheaper price, you got to pay in advance and it's non-refundable. This was worth a lot of money. Here's a couple of fun things along the way. This was what was happening to Marriott's corporate room nights over years and years until we did a program, an analytical program that said, let's try lowering our rates some year. Guess what the general managers of all of the Marriott hotels, when I was there, we had 2,200 hotels. Guess how happy they were with me when I told them, we want to lower our rates. Nobody was happy with us, right? So we did it, and this is what happened. And I don't have the time to get into the details. But basically, we lowered the rates, and a lot more people went up and paid higher corporate rates because in the mix of things, we made a lot more money. But it took some analytics to do that. Lest you think that everything I ever did was really happy and friendly, I'm going to show you one good and one bad. This is to Bill Tiefel and Bob Block, my bosses, with a copy to Bill Marriott. My boss wrote, attached, please find a copy of a speech Rich Hanks will be giving at an international yield management conference, blah, blah, blah. This is Bill Marriott's writing at the top to my boss. Steve Wise, this is great. So simple, even I can understand it. Bill Marriott, oh, awesome. Do you think I framed this on our wall? You bet. Till I got this one. Steve Wise, the information presented in this document is the most confusing I've seen in a long time. Let's get together and discuss. There's my name. Oh my gosh. Do you think I framed this one? Absolutely. I framed them both to help remind myself. Even though I love analytics, you got to make it simple so that people can understand. All right. My partners and I founded what's called Mindshare. It's now called In Moment. You might have seen it. It's at 110th South. It has to do with customer feedback. I'm going to show you a few graphs that I presented at various different large audiences over the years to try and explain certain things. This is customer satisfaction at a restaurant. You all know this restaurant. Probably most of you have eaten at this restaurant. And the average of all their stores was 84%. This is not NPS, this is Customer Satisfaction Index. 84%, that's pretty good, isn't it? Until you press the button and you see it all depends on which restaurant you went to. Some of them were 69, some of them were 95s. And what we found through the verbatim comments is a lot of people would actually drive past 2 of the restaurants to get to a 3rd because it was so much better in customer service. I presented this at their national conference. There's 4,500 general managers, and I put this slide up and I thought I was going to get lynched. But it's the truth. And they made changes that helped make them more money. Okay, you're going to be analysts for a second. On the left side is music level. This is at a restaurant. The bottom is how satisfied I am with the atmosphere. What can you tell me about this restaurant and music levels? Go ahead.
It'd be better to use music level 4 because they have higher level of satisfaction.
Okay, it would be better to use music level 4. Say it in a negative way. That's exactly right. Say that in a negative way or slightly different way. Can you be too quiet? Do you want it to be completely quiet in a restaurant? You want it to be a little bit louder, a little bit louder? How about the restaurants my wife and I sometimes go to where they're playing, shall we call it rap? I call it noise. My children don't like that. Should you have it really loud? No, because the satisfaction starts to decline. So if you knew what that level was, if you had asked 1,000 customers, Where would you place your music? At number 4. It seems really simple, but this blew them away. Because guess what? They let every manager of every restaurant in the chain decide, where we're going to do this. Okay, another one. Who can tell me what you learned from this? This has to do with appetizers and whether or not there was enough cream in them. I won't get into the details, but first of all, where are the healthiest parts of the United States? Just in general, you're not being politically incorrect. Actually, unfortunately, because of the shootings last week, but Boulder, Colorado is actually one of the healthiest places, right? Utah is actually one of the healthiest places. My wife and I lived in Mississippi for 3 years. Is Mississippi and Alabama, are they known as healthy? Not usually. So in this case, you have the appetizer menu choices are too heavy in the middle, too light in some places, and then on the coast about right. What would you do if you were in charge of this restaurant company? Would you have one menu for appetizers? Guess what this company did? One menu for appetizers. By the way, it's the same with taco companies, whether or not the hot sauce is hot or medium or light. So is this a piece of analysis that would change your sales if you worked at this restaurant chain? Another one, by the way, which you all know. I'll skip through this one. This one's really simple. What's more important? Being a friendly clerk or being nice looking? Friendly. All right, so what does the future hold for analytics? I pulled one slide out of our Mindshare in-moment documents. This is a verbatim text comment that came in on a cell phone. Not only was the line at the counter long, the cashier was texting on her cell phone, rudely ignoring when I finally got my food. The fries were burned, my hamburger patty was cold, and I wasn't given any napkins. Does that sound pretty normal for a bad experience? Guess what the future of data is? Some of you are in classes, I hope, on either natural language processing or AI. But this is what the Mindshare now in-moment system would do. It would yank out of all this unstructured data, structured data. We would take the data as unstructured voice comments, turn it into structured comments, and then apply it along with when the people had taken their surveys to tell how things are going. From that, I can tell exactly what to do. Should we allow a cashier to be on the cell phone when someone's checking out at this restaurant? It seems so simple, right? They had no rule against it. They had rules about what she or he should look like and what they should wear and uniform cleanliness. No rule on cell phones. So today we have a bunch of unstructured data. In the future, for the coming years, we're going to have massive data that's structured and allows us to make better decisions. And there are great companies doing things like this. All right, let me finish up the last few minutes with my belief on how to win using analytics. I think no matter how long I've been doing this, I see so many times when the basics are not followed. I know that seems so simple. I'm going to give you a couple examples. I'm going to tell you that you need to think beyond the analysis. And I'm going to give you an example. When I hire people, and I'm probably up to 500, probably more than that, maybe 1,000 people in my life I've hired, I always look for the first thing is always honesty. And the second thing is intellectual curiosity. Because not everybody knows all the answers. So the question is, can you find the answers? Do you have intellectual curiosity? I ask interview questions that are sometimes made fun of because they require you to think. Always look through the other person's eyes. One of the things I learned at In Moment is that when you drive up to a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A or an Arby's, when was the last time the manager got in his or her car and actually drove through the drive-thru? Never. General Patton said, no good decision was ever made in a swivel chair. I believe that. And so one of the things that I believe strongly is if you're in a business, you have to do the thing. At Marriott, I was in charge of all revenues in the world, $17 billion. I had 6 senior vice presidents that reported to me, and they were all 10 years older than I was. I was 37, 38 years old. I'm the EVP of sales and marketing. These guys have forgotten more than I know. Guess what I made them all do the first week? Go work in a hotel, clean toilets, work the front desk. They'd say, but I'm in sales or I'm in marketing and I'm not in operations. I said, I don't care. We're all going to go. I went and cleaned toilets. I learned how to really put a pillowcase cover on a pillow, by the way. I'll tell you after if you want to know how to do that and not get COVID. You know what? You got to do the thing. If you want to be successful in life, you have to do these things. But the most important thing you can do right now as a student is urgency and responsiveness. Those are not the same thing. Urgency is a demonstration that I'm going to do it. Responsiveness is doing it. If you call my cell phone right now, do you know what it'll say? This is Rich Hanks. I'm going to get back to you whenever I dang well feel like it. That's what a lot of them say, right? I'll get back to you as soon as I can. You know what mine says? Leave me a message. I'll call you back today. Holy Moses. Does that put pressure on me? You bet. I have to call everybody back today. It's annoying. But guess what? It separates me from everybody else in the world that just wants to be normal. I want them to know urgency, responsiveness. The last thing is, this will sound a little bit Pollyannish, but I don't care. You be that person. Stop talking about the other people that do great things. I'm so sick of hearing about Qualtrics. You go be it. You go be it. Okay, let's go through a couple of these real quick. The basics, my favorite. They asked Bill Marriott Sr., JW, what have you learned in 500 years or 50 years in restaurants and hotels? He said, hot food hot, cold food cold. They asked Conrad Hilton, what's your number one piece of advice? Tell people to leave the shower curtain on the inside of the tub. People laugh when I show this, but guess what? These are 2 of the most impressive men in the history of hotels. And these are their 2 most important quotes. This is from a presentation that I pulled off the internet probably 2-3 months ago. Can you see anything, anybody? This is our chief marketing officer. He didn't go to college and he doesn't really know how to spell and he doesn't know, I don't know, I after E except after. He just doesn't care, is what this tells me. I don't want to hire this as my new chief marketing officer if he can't spell the word chief. Here's some famous quotes. There was a 1631 version of the King James Bible that said, thou shalt commit adultery. Guess what everybody's favorite Bible was? True story, by the way. Go look it up. It's awesome. People will say, don't sweat the small stuff. I hear this all the time. That's horse hockey. Get that out of your mind, your lexicon, your cliches. It's a good thing for life to say don't stress out and don't be stressed and don't sweat the small stuff. But for business, everything you do should be sweating the small stuff because that's what distinguishes you. All right, a big part of doing the basics is don't do stupid stuff. You guys all know Dwight? Before I do anything, I ask myself, would an idiot do this? And if the answer is yes, I do not do that thing. Okay, great piece of advice from Dwight. Let me give you an example. This is now, unfortunately, 13 years old, and I can't point to it, but this is a refund check from AT&T for 1 cent. Is this a stupid thing? This is a stupid thing. Any of you been in business, have any idea what it would cost to send that out? It's about, in those days, it was about $7 to $7.50 to send this out. $7. Guess what? They sent me another one a week later. I got 2 of these. Don't do stupid stuff. It sounds so easy, but I could give you 100 examples, but we don't have time. This is another one. Think beyond the analysis. Now, I've loved this story since I first heard it. I had just read on the internet this last couple days when I was preparing this talk that this might be apocryphal. It might be a myth. I don't care. I'm going to still keep telling it. So in World War II, all the fighters came back, and this is where all the bullet holes were. So the analysts all got together and said, well, let's figure it out. We should probably strengthen, whoops, wrong one. we should probably reinforce the damaged sections of the planes. Makes sense, right? Let's put some heavy steel in all the places where the bullet holes are, right? That's what I would have done. No. The answer is reinforce all the undamaged sections. Why? Who can tell me why? You, sir.
Those planes didn't make it back.
Those are the planes that didn't make it back. The ones that made it back had bullet holes in all the red places. The ones who didn't make it back, that's where we should reinforce the airplanes. Make sense? Sometimes you have to think beyond the analysis. Let me give a great example of that. When I'm at Marriott, Marriott invents two things during my 13 years there. One of them was, I didn't invent these, I had nothing to do with these. These are in operations. I was a sales guy, sales marketing guy. So one of them was breakfast. You tell us you want breakfast at 6:15, you're going to have breakfast at 6:15. The other one was you want to check out. You want your folio under your door so that you can just get out of there. Everybody with me? Neither of those things existed before I don't know, the 1980s, 90s. What's wrong with this? Because don't you get an A plus if, let's say my breakfast, I tell them 6 and it's there at 6:15. Let's say I tell them 6:15 and it's there at 6:15. And my folio is there at 4 o'clock in the morning. I particularly worded those in that order to try and get you to think, what do you think is wrong with this? How can I get an A plus on both of these and still have a D minus experience? When was the folio delivered under your door? Before you were billed for your breakfast. What's not on your folio? Your breakfast. So what do you have to do? Go down to the front desk. Did we solve the problem? Did we serve them correctly? No. So you have to think through their eyes. Okay. Urgency and responsiveness, I gave you enough on this. I guess the very simple question is, how has Amazon Prime come? This is during your lifetimes now, right? I won't give any that are during my lifetime. There's a lot, by the way. ATMs. Used to go for a restaurant and they would charge you for every single refill of every single Diet Coke till they figured out that the Diet Coke cost 1 cent. Probably not a good idea. But this is in your lifetimes. How has Amazon Prime completely blown out of the water everything? Urgency, responsiveness. I ordered 20 books with my wife last night. Guess when they're coming? One of them's already at my doorstep. I just got a thing in my email. The other ones are coming tomorrow. Did that happen when you were kids? No, none of you. So what's that going to be for you? Urgency and responsiveness. You better think about this. If you want to stand out, this is going to be something you need to think about. Okay, last slide, the last few slides. The secret of business is that it isn't just people. It's a person. It's you. Every great institution is merely the length and shadow of one individual. And my favorite business poem: stroll every park, search every city, you'll find no monument to a committee. This probably should make some of you afraid because you can't be with groups on everything, but this should be a motivating factor for most of you. You can make a difference. And this isn't some rah-rah speech. I've given you examples of, frankly, where I made a huge difference. And sometimes it was with teams of people. I'm not trying to get credit here. I'm just trying to say nobody ever said I had to go do these things. I just went and did them. If you want to be successful, when you have an idea, do it. You've got this. And with that, I will take any questions. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have one from the audience. It said, is there a niche in analytic career for computer scientists?
Yes, I have what they used to call a minor. I have a minor in computer science from BYU. And then I was a software CEO several times. And I still consider myself an analyst. So Yeah, computer science is a great place, teaches you great thinking, structured thinking. But again, some of the things require you to think outside the box. So yeah, the short answer is yes. Sir?
So like, data doesn't lie, or at least it's not supposed to. How do you help people come to grips with that? Because a lot of times I feel like when you're presented with data, a lot of times people will either run from it or reject it because they have that that feeling or whatnot. So how do you get people to accept it?
How do you get people to accept data? Right? Particularly if it's bad. At the risk of getting myself in trouble, I spoke, I got to disguise this, I spoke 6 years in a row at the National Convention of General Managers of a haircutting salon that you'll all know. The hook of this haircutting salon is sports. The second hook of the haircutting salon is vacuums. They think it's way more important to vacuum up hair than to sweep it. I did an analysis as the CEO of Mindshare, in Moment now. I did my own analysis of it. And I presented in front of all the general managers of this salon, I think it was in Orlando or Atlanta somewhere, that their customers couldn't care at all about vacuums. And they were spending millions of dollars on vacuums because the higher-ups at this company thought that vacuums were more cleanly, or I don't know. It didn't matter. All I know is it didn't come out in the top 20 of things. So I presented that, and guess what happened? He fired me and my company. So the answer is, I don't know. If you figure it out, will you let me know? We got all the other hair cuttings, great clips and cost cutters, and we got all the other ones. This particular one, if somebody has their mind set, it's like McCracken's apple chips. That was codenamed Eden inside of Frito-Lay, right? Apples, Eden, get it? Dr. Hurd, Dennis Hurd, who I respect greatly. I never knew him because he was a higher up and I was a lower level. I was a grunt boy, right? He'd been working on apple chips for years. And it's like the old days, my dad and my family would go Christmas caroling and my dad would always push me to the front to sing. That's what happened to me. All of my bosses at Frito-Lay pushed me into the boardroom to tell them that guess what? Your pet project of the last 10 years that's going to expand you from Doritos and Lay's and Ruffles and Fritos into vegetables doesn't work. I was scared to death. And I actually told my boss, why don't you guys come in and do this? I'm Mr. Low Level. Well, guess what? There were enough people in that room to offset other people who it was their pet project. So I guess one of the answers would be surround yourself with people who will support you when you do. Because heavens knows I can give you literally 50 stories of when I've had to tell bad news to somebody above me, and I was always worried, I wonder if I'm going to get fired for this. Sometimes, once, illegal. There were some illegal words that were presented as if they were from me, and I just presented right to the CEO, these are not my words, I do not believe this. Any other questions?
I think that's what
Is that it?
time for. Thank you.
All right, thank you.